And we're live. Good morning, good evening, good night. Actually, Joseph is good evening. So it's very appropriate for me to say that. And I will let you tell the audience where you are joining me from in just a minute. But welcome everyone to the next Employee Resource Group ERG Resource Sessions. My name is Lola Adeyemo and I'm an ERG consultant. And what that means is that I work with organizations to build communities within their workplace. And I love using the word communities because ERG, BRG, affinity group, even DEI groups, focus groups. So I work with organizations to kind of build those internal communities and enhance their employee engagement and retention. So a while back, we started this series to really have deeper conversations with consultants and experts and thought leaders on topics that are shaping the workplace, topics that are emerging for ERG leaders. And today we're going to be diving a little deep as we can get in 30 minutes into neurodiversity in the workplace. And I am really excited to chat with Joseph. Joseph has been a part of the All Things ERG community for a while now, which is our first Friday call where we bring ERGs together, and a large percentage of the people in attendance are also people that serve these groups and these organizations. So thank you, Joseph, for being here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and thank you for having me.
All right. So if you want to introduce yourself, tell the audience. Oh, for those listening, I am in California, San Diego. And Joseph, you want to tell us where you are located and then what you do?
Sure. Well, I'm currently located on the beautiful Mediterranean island known as Malta. If you don't know where Malta is, there's the boot known as Italy. Below the boot is the sister island of Italy called Sicily. And then right below Sicily is a speck of dust. That is Malta.
Love it. I love hearing how you describe where Malta is. I think I've heard you say that a while before, but
Well, everybody's like, where is Malta? I've never heard of Malta before. And like, where do I locate Malta? Well, that's how you locate Malta. I'm originally from Canada, but I have Maltese roots and been living in Malta for the last 10 years. And I'm a neurodiversity consultant where I go into businesses and I bring awareness and consultation in a variety of formats through speaking engagements, one-to-one consultation, one-to-one coaching, and mentoring in regards to what is neurodiversity and how to support neurodivergence within the workplace and how to create, frankly, a more inclusive working environment for neurodivergent talent.
thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that, Joseph. And all right, let's walk back on that a little bit, right? Because I think the beauty of these conversations is also, there's so many things people can Google about you, but when I have founders, when I have purpose-driven, passionate entrepreneurs like you, I love to give my audience a little bit of your why. Can you tell us a little bit about what inspired your work? Like, why do you do
Sure.
what you do?
Well, absolutely. I'm neurodivergent myself. I was diagnosed at a very young age with what is known as visual processing condition. And in particular, I have what is known as oh God, visual motor. I just forgot what it is. Visual motor, visual perception. There we go. And working memory, which relates to executive function. And in the last 5 to 6 years now, I've had an added diagnosis of being dyslexic. So I have what is known as a co-occurrence. And I say I'm 50% dyslexic because quite often dyslexia gets misdiagnosed. Sorry, visual perception often gets misdiagnosed as being dyslexic. So not too sure, but we'll go with it and say I'm also dyslexic. Now, I've been running my own business for 20 plus years as a professional photographer. And when moving into Malta, we transformed or transferred our business, should I say, but also transformed our business into a different direction, which freed me up to explore other opportunities, which where I later on entered the workplace. And I found that the workplace to be very non-supportive to neurodivergent talent and not knowing how to support neurodivergent talent. And even when I was running my business, every time I looked for support because I knew what my struggles were, everything out there was geared towards kids. So at that time point, I decided I needed to create a consulting firm that will bring this awareness towards businesses to understand they're leaving a lot of talent at the door that they're not really supporting the talent and not getting the benefits out of that talent, and not understanding that it actually makes good business sense to be inclusive to neurodivergent talent. And when you're inclusive to neurodivergent talent, that your bottom line actually improves because you become more inclusive, and you also be able to retain that talent and grow that talent.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think part of why these conversations. First, October is there's a lot of so on the All Things ERG call, we kind of look through calendars every month. October is one of those months that has so many health related days and months, and a lot of times people are like, well, we can't celebrate everything. The idea is not to celebrate everything. The idea is to understand and acknowledge a lot of these things is not separate from the workplace. Is very, very present, whether your organization understands it or not. So I think talking about being inclusive for neurodivergence, awareness for neurodivergence in the workplace, it spans across recruiting, as you said, even the hiring process and then getting the best from your employees. But let's talk about the stigmas a little bit and some of the misconceptions around neurodivergence. What are some common misconceptions around neurodivergent individuals in the workplace, and maybe some ways that organizations can overcome those?
Well, you made a lot of misconceptions as regards to that certain neurotypes. When we talk about neurotypes, we're looking at ADHD, dyslexia, autism, dyscalculia, development coordination disorder, development language disorder, and so forth. That one would not be suited for particular jobs. Or we're looking at the aspect that they're not trying hard enough. Trying hard enough is a common uh, comment being made, or that they're lazy, or they make a lot of mistakes. These are some really misconceptions. And again, when we take a look at, let's say, performance reviews, you would see that these kind of comments will come up, that an individual is not organized, that an individual is not working hard enough or not trying hard enough, that an individual makes a lot of mistakes for one particular reason or another, or not being able to prioritize. Obviously there are signs showing before the performance review, and these are all indications that this individual might very well be neurodivergent. And when we talk about neurodivergence, it's about understanding the different brain types that exist. It's understanding how those brain types impact people differently, and how they think and perform differently. And it's also understanding the strong connection and how it impacts executive function, which is, again, is another aspect of understanding how the brain works. And when we take a look at executive function, and for those of you who are wondering where executive function is, here's a very simple way where you will never forget where to find your executive function. You take your hand and you do as I do. Congratulations, you found your executive function. It's located right here. And it's responsible for all the comments that people make of being laziness. It's responsible for organization. It's responsible for prioritization, for task initiation. It's responsible for working memory. And basically, the best way to identify what working memory is think of it as a post-it note, a very small post-it note where you're only able to retain certain amount of information, and any additional information cannot be put onto that post-it note because you're out of space. So it's about retaining and being able to know what to do with that information. You then get into problem solving and self-regulation. These are all aspects of executive function, which is all responsible for being able to do everyday tasks that people tend to complain about and make derogatory comments on in regards to one's performance and how they operate in the workplace.
Yeah, I think of that, one of those misconceptions around the word laziness. I think using the word laziness is also a way to shift to responsibility from ourselves. As a manager, as a people leader, I don't want to take ownership of that task to get to know and understand how to support you, right?
Yeah.
I want you to, to fix yourself and just get my job done. And part of why we need to continue to have these conversations is educating people so they understand that, there's more than one way to get something done. Your responsibility as a manager is to guide on the goals, but there are different ways that your employee, your teammates can execute to get to those goals, right? So I think we also need to take some responsibility in the workplace to say, I have some work to do in order to support my team and maybe even my coworkers, right? In
Yeah,
the environment.
yeah. When we go back to the comment laziness or to the comment of need to work harder, I mean that
Mhm.
neurodivergent individual is obviously qualified to be in that job. They have the skill sets, they know what they're doing, they have the experience. They're obviously working really hard, and they're really working hard at the level that they're at based on their neurotype. There's only so much more hard work that they can do. But if there's particular struggles, then that's where again the manager needs to step up and become more of a coach and mentor, and to also be aware of identifying not what their neurotype is, but what are their strengths. We tend to always take a look at the deficits of an individual and what the problems are with that person. But what are their strengths, and why aren't you not focusing on the strengths? And what are
Right.
you doing to help elevate those strengths while at the same time trying to find a solution to support them with their particular challenges?
Yeah. All right. Well, so many of those stigmas. If you have questions, if you need resources, you know where to find Joseph. But I I also wanted to talk about something else that you mentioned earlier when you're talking about your work is that business case, right? So the phrase business case, if you work with corporate clients, if you work with organization, sometimes we try not to want to talk about it, but we should talk about it. Organizations are in business to make money, right? If the organization is not delivering results, is not delivering on its product, there is a risk of you not getting paid as an employee of the company going under. So let's talk about that business case for neurodiversity. How can organizations benefit from embracing neurodiversity? And so beyond the DEI perspective, but can you speak to that more around innovation, creativity, and overall business process?
Well, let's start off with the business case aspect. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, I find a lot of organizations who say that they're inclusive or don't have space for neurodivergence, uh, because when they say that, it comes down to, have you actually done a business case to justify the argument or statement that you've made there? Have you actually looked into the benefit, to the positives or negatives of onboarding someone who's neurodivergent? And the other aspect too is 20% of the population is neurodivergent, which means
Right.
depending on the size. So if you're a small company of 20 people, or if you're a large company of 500 people, let's say, that's
You already have them.
that's 20% of your employee population
Right.
that you are hiring and you're not aware of, or you're not fully recognizing.
Exactly. They're already at your organization. Yeah.
They're already there and they're already working hard. They could be some of your top people, never mind the people that are giving a bad performance review to.
Right.
And a lot of neurodivergents end up being in high level positions because of what they're able to do and able to achieve, because you're so focused on their strengths. So when we take a look at the benefits, you know one, we have to take a look at the organization and how the organization is fostering a more strength based philosophy, and also
Mhm.
building better and stronger relationships with their employees to actually get the benefits. I mean, we can talk about the benefits of creativity, innovation. We can talk about dyslexics who are able to see through spatial reasoning or through narrative reasoning. We can talk about ADHDers who have pattern recognition, or we can talk about, and that's not ADHD. Actually, ADHDers have pattern recognition as well, but also autistic individuals who have pattern recognitions. Or we can talk about how both ADHDers and dyslexics as well as autistics are great problem solvers because they can see particular patterns and see more of the bigger picture. With that said, though, it's kind of pointless to talk about the benefits if your organization is not fostering a strength-based focus
Right.
and looking at your relationship with your employees to start engaging and looking at how you can pull those strengths out of them, while at the same time supporting their challenges. Because if you're really focused on their challenges, then you're really going to miss their strengths and benefits. So it's,
Right.
it's, it's just this catch 22 scenario. You can't have one without the other.
Right.
And then once you create that fostering organization that focus on strengths and supporting challenges, then at that point, then you can start talking about the benefits and also benefiting from those benefits.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think this feeds right into employee resource groups and the communities at your organization, which is again a lot of the people listening either have ERGs, are thinking of starting ERG programs, or are ERG leaders themselves. Not just disability ERG or specific ERG. Now talking about the concept of ERG itself, right? A lot of companies I, I've seen the value of bringing communities together within their organization. Uh, but it's really the value is really in how you're able to take the feedback from these communities. It's not in establishing these groups and leaving them in the corners. Is how is the feedback loop? When you set up these groups, are they impacting your policies and processes? And that's where the conversations you just talked about. If you as an organization have employee groups that are gathering together, if you're having conversations around neurodiversity in the workplace, how are you listening to them and then taking some of that input and feedback to change your policies and systems, right? So speak to that a little bit when we talk about accommodations and
Well, this is a very,
productivity workplace.
yeah, absolutely. Well, this is a very important aspect. And, there's a lot of great research that's been coming out, particularly out of the UK, in regards to this. And, when we talk about accommodations and we talk about, especially, when we take a look, and I'm assuming, I know you have a worldwide network here, but at the same time, I'm assuming the majority of your audience is the United States. There's really two different philosophies here, and the philosophy coming out of the UK, which is a philosophy that really makes sense, and this philosophy that I'm applying in my consultancy really differs from the philosophy and practices happening in particular in the United States or some other regions, which is, in order to get accommodations, you need to have a diagnosis. And the philosophy that I'm driving and coming from those in the UK is accommodations first. You don't need a diagnosis to get an accommodation. The diagnosis is more for a personal person to understand what their neurotype is, who they are, why they're having particular challenges, how they think and behave differently. It really connects the dots for people. But when we get into the workplace, what's really important is not having a diagnosis, but having a work assessment
Mm,
and understanding what are your strengths and challenges. How can we elevate your strengths, and how can we support those particular challenges so that way you can work better and perform well within your job, which then of course the company will benefit even more so because they get that greater output that they're looking for. So we need to move towards an accommodations first approach. And one of the great tools that I'm using is spike profiles. Spike Profiles is it's basically a self work assessment tool where the employee can take the tool that I'm using is ISO improved. It provides over 450 strategies, and it takes a look at basically the the neurotypes and their executive function challenges and puts them into practical categories of different tasks, such as motor skills, typing, memory, organizations, and so forth. And then evaluates them on a scoring system based on how they answered these 66 questions in regards to where their strengths or challenges are. And then from there, makes recommendations based on those strengths and challenges, what kind of accommodations they need. Particularly, when we go back to having a conversation with your manager, well, tell me what kind of accommodations you need and how I can support you. Many neurodivergents, even
I don't,
myself for a very long time,
you don't
I
know.
knew what my challenges or my neurodiversity was, but I didn't know what my strengths and challenges were. And I didn't know how to articulate or
It
explain to
is. Yeah.
individuals what
It,
I needed,
right.
you know?
Right.
And the spike profile breaks down that barrier because it simplifies it and says, here's the simple language. Here how it applies to, say, organizations and things that you can do to improve your organization. And this is
Yeah.
how you can apply this towards the job. So that gives the person that knowledge, the skills that they need, but also gives them the capability to have that conversation with their manager and say, this is what I need. This is the type of accommodations that I require. And
Right.
then from there, we can move in towards an accommodations first approach, which then goes into coaching and mentoring and so forth.
Yeah, I love that. And as that just landed so well with me. So I've worked in within corporate America and in roles where we have this conversation about accommodation and just all of the oops that people have to jump through to get an accommodation. And essentially, it starts with trust. I don't even feel psychologically safe at your organization to put all my stuff out there for my manager or for somebody to try and get some accommodation. And so I love the approach of accommodations first,
Right.
because then you are building your environment to be a safe space for people to be able to get the support that they might not even know yet that they need. I mean, you already have these employees. Why not support them to get the best from them, productivity wise?
Right. And when we go back to the studies that I mentioned coming out of the UK, one of the studies found something very interesting. The two top concerns for neurodivergent employees was psychological safety and career satisfaction. If they're not feeling psychologically safe, they're not going to disclose. There's
Right,
going to be challenges in the workplace. And then, of course, comes the career satisfaction where they're not being recognized for their contributions towards the company and being valued for their skill set. With that said, though, those two top concerns has a foundation.
right,
And that foundation is having accommodations.
right,
And if you don't have accommodations, then you're not getting psychologically safe and you're not getting career satisfaction.
right,
And then the most important thing too, as well, is because everybody's always looking for a one size fits all. There isn't a one size fits all. You know, I can be in one job right now, and I have my spike profile, and I have my accommodations, and I have my strengths. Then you decide to promote me. Well, now I'm changing environments.
right,
I'm moving into a new skill set where the skills I have may still apply, but the strengths and challenges may now differ because now the
right,
accommodations will differ. So I'm now going to need to have a new assessment and a new evaluation of what kind of accommodations I need. So it all depends in regards to the individual and
right,
where they're at because I'm dyslexic, somebody else might be dyslexic. Our strengths and challenges will differ even though we're both dyslexic because we're basing it on the label because again it's what do you call a spectrum.
yeah,
And then of course when we get into different environments, those strengths and challenges will vary.
right.
So we have to be flexible and we have to adjust.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think the work you're doing is really important because the conversations and all of the setup, they need to happen with the leaders at the organizational level to establish these foundations. And this is how we build inclusive workplaces. And once an organization is comfortable having these conversations, these accommodation discussions, it impacts more than individuals on the spectrum. It impacts everybody. It makes the workplace a more inclusive workplace for all. And you're right. I think we have these conversations more around kids because we're thinking, oh, kids cannot communicate their needs, but adults can. But that's not true because
It's
if
not
you're an
true.
adult on the spectrum within the workplace, you also might not have the words to accommodate. I do think though, even in and this is personal for me, I don't even want to go into the details, but um, even within the school system for little kids is like they want you to jump through hoops and show them a document that your child needs some support before they provide the support.
Yeah,
The
that comes
environment is
down to the
together.
yeah, that comes
Accommodation.
down to well, yeah, but
Yeah.
it also comes down to a debate about a medical model versus a social model, which is a completely different topic and not enough time to to get into.
Let's
You
face the
know,
work.
but you know, when we take very quickly when we take a look at the educational model, it's a bit of a it's an irony in a number of aspects because one, we're looking at a basically reduction. You know, where we provide the accommodations and then we're not making the connection that the reason why the student starts to do well is because of the accommodations,
Right.
and then suddenly we decide to take away the accommodations. One of the things that I find very frustrating is why isn't the workplace, sorry, the education system creating a bridge from education to the workplace and saying, you know, from college grads to university grads or high school grads, depending on where they are, and
Right.
saying, look, are you aware that 20% of our student population is neurodivergent? These are the
Yeah.
accommodations that we've provided to help them improve with their academic journey. So these are the type of accommodations that you're going to make at the workplace.
The
Where
workplace.
is that bridge? It's not
Yeah.
there, and it's really frustrating. And coming back to, you know, staying on education for a moment, you know, ironically, this week a friend of mine in the UK is hosting a neurodiversity educational summit, and it's not in regards to awareness for neurodiversity towards kids. It's actually awareness towards neurodivergent teachers who are not getting recognized for their lived experience to support students and support the
Student.
school system, as well as them themselves not getting the support as a neurodivergent teacher employee. So again, it comes all back to this full circle about what we're talking about. And the other irony as well is that you said that, you know, and I want to jump on it, is the aspect of what we're talking about applies to everybody. What we're talking
Yeah.
about is universal design. You
Right.
know, when we take a look at, you know, accommodations, for example, of let's say more flexible work is an accommodation. You know, originally that was a big push for by the neurodivergent community, but then we discovered, thanks to COVID, that that actually benefits everyone.
Really,
That's a
yeah.
universal design principle, right? So when we take a look at accommodations, we want to take a look at it. Yes, we want to support this particular segment, but then we want
Right.
to take a look at it and say, how does it support everyone else from a universal design
Right.
principle perspective?
Right. And I think when it comes to abilities, disabilities, however we call it, I think we've seen over the years, even before COVID, that once these conversations happen to accommodate somebody, it shifts because that so-called accommodation makes it a better world
Yeah,
for everybody. So, but the reason why we need to have these amplified conversations with people is because there's a norm, there's a boundary we've built around what is the normal.
yeah,
And so anything that is outside of that, we think it is something that need extra work, and we
yeah.
don't want to do that work. But there is no norm because everyone is different. Everyone kind of processes things differently. Everyone kind of does this differently, and so um, you also brought up a good point that I think I'm going to continue to do some research around. That is, what is the bridge? What is the bridge around these? Right? It's like you have a kid who is on IEP, who is getting all the support in elementary school. Is there a bridge that takes them to college? Is there a bridge that takes them through the process of applying? Right? Because we talk about even getting support as a neurodiverse individual in college. What about the job application process? Is
Yeah.
there anything to support them in getting into the workplace? Because there's also a transition that happens there, right? Is how do I apply for jobs? How do I present myself so my prospective employer sees the skills that I bring, right? And then how do
Right.
I show up at interviews? And then so it's a continuous stretch. It's not this isolated thing that you deal with and then you're done or you are cured. It's not a
Yeah.
disease that you're cured
Well,
of
yeah. I
before.
mean, going back to your comment earlier in regards to kids, you know, how do we support neurodivergent kids? Because that's been the topic of discussion for 30
Mhm.
plus years. But again, no one made the connection that a dyslexic or autistic child is going to grow up to, as an autistic, dyslexic adult. And
Yes,
where's the support
exactly.
for them in the workplace? And I mean, there's you mentioned programs. I mean, there's autism to work programs, there's ADHD to work programs. And when we take a look at those two, for example, the argument, of course, is that those who scream the loudest gets the most attention. So then when we take a look at dyscalculia, well, is there dyscalculia to work program? No, because they've been overshadowed by the other two. Or
Right,
is there development coordination to
right,
work program? Again, no, because they've been overshadowed by the other two. And as a result, they get resources, but the other ones don't. They
right.
get support and the other ones don't. And
Don't.
I want to jump on very quickly. You talked about normalization, and I find this interesting because one of the presentations that I do is a presentation in regards to accommodations. And when we take a look at a lot of things, we don't see them as accommodations anymore because it's been normalized.
Mm,
So, for
right.
example, the mobile phone, okay? The mobile phone's only a 16-year-old invention, the mobile phone that we know of today. So 16 years ago, the idea of having a Nokia or a BlackBerry, majority of people said I would never buy one. I never have one. I don't need it. I have a phone connected to the wall. That's all I need. But 16 years later, we all have one in our pocket and we all can't live with it because it's now become normalized. But the irony is
Normal.
that this is an accommodation, right? But we no longer see it as an accommodation anymore.
Yeah.
So, for example, going back to an earlier question in regards to some of the stigmas. So, there's been some studies here locally in regards to well-being, in regards to employees feeling that or needing that, stating that deadlines are too tight, that they're taking longer to do projects. Okay,
Mhm.
these are all indications of potentially neurodivergent difficulties, but we don't see it because not meeting deadlines or taking too long has been seen as normalized work behavior, and that's something
Right,
that we criticize. When
right.
we need to get out of looking at it normalized and start saying to ourselves, what's really going on here?
What's really going on? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you. This was great. I appreciate the work you do, and I think more organizations, um, kind of simplifying it is accommodations first. Is that, am I mixing it up? Yeah,
You got it
accommodations,
right. You got it
right?
right. Bang on.
Accommodations first. And I think that's the way to approach this conversation in the workplace, right? Regardless of what diagnosis has happened, what support they've come, you have a workplace and you want people to be performing. You want, your product to be coming out. You want your services to be excellent. You have people at work. So if there's how do people reach out to you if they want to follow up and learn more about your work? I know we have these on different platforms, but if you want to just say your email so people have it verbally, and then I will drop it on the chat as well after.
Sure. My email is very simple. It's info@josephkmuscat.com. That's
Yep.
Muscat.
Yep, and that's on the screen. So thank you, Joseph. So before we wrap up, on a topic that could probably take us a while, yeah, it's I wanted you to talk about an event that you have coming up, and it's going to be recorded. So depending on when anybody is watching this, This is happening October 11th,
Oh, October 10th from
October
1
10th.
p.m. Yeah, October 10th from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. Central European time. So you need
Okay.
to do a little bit of time conversion
A bit
depending
of
where you
time
are in the world.
time change. Yep. And if you're listening to this, I will put the link there. And the beauty of it is it's all recorded. You have access to it. So tell us about that event.
Absolutely. Well, it's basically an event where I felt that there was a need to give HR professionals, DEI leaders, ERG leaders, business leaders practical strategies that they can take away with to start applying or implementing implementing into their workplace to start creating more neo-inclusive workplace. Because for the last 5 years, we've neurodiversity is the new hot kid in town in DEI, and everybody's talking about what is neurodiversity. And I see a gap in regards to providing practical solutions that you can implement right now. So I brought together about 12 speakers who are all specialists in their area for neuro inclusion to present to you, excuse me, I'm losing my train of thought, to present to you practical strategies in a variety of areas on how to become more inclusive for neurodivergent talent. So, for example, I'm going to have Natalie Brooks, the founder of Dyslexia in Adults, who's going to talk about practical solutions to support dyslexics in the workplace. I have Sydney Butler, who is an HR specialist and a policy specialist who specializes in taking people or companies by the hand and how to create inclusive policies for neurodivergent talent. So these are the types of speakers that I'm bringing on board to present to you, to give you the strategies and solutions that you need. So it's
Absolutely.
basically Neurodiversity at Work Summit. It's happening next week at the 10th of October from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. Central European Time. And I look forward to seeing you there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joseph. We're looking forward to it. Appreciate the work you're doing. And thank you for taking the time to open with me today. Have a great evening, day, depending on when everybody is listening. All right. So if you have any question, you can drop it in the comment. I will be sure to follow up. And I will also be dropping Joseph's email as well for follow-ups. We're very much present on LinkedIn. And this has been streamed on YouTube and Facebook as well. So it's why I'm going on about email. But if you're on LinkedIn, we're very present on LinkedIn. And on every first Friday, I'm host the All Things ERG call. It's 10 a.m. Pacific, talking about time zone. I don't know what time Joseph joins us, but that's late for him. But Joseph is always on there. So that's another spot where you can always find myself or Joseph every first Friday. We are on the call. So feel free to get registered, join us, put the series on your calendar, and we hope to see you at the summit. Thank you, Joseph.
Thank you.